Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Hello, good people, and welcome to another episode of I Thought You'd Like to Know This Too. I am your host, Michael Horn, today, and I'm with just a fantastic local guest who is in the same city that I am in, St. Louis, Missouri, here, the Rome of the West. Like I said, his name is Bill Hennessy. I'm the host, Michael Horn. This segment is I Thought You'd Like to Know This Too. It's just where we bring you stories of individuals that are just doing various ministries and apostolates, and just they have a lot of good insights to share with everyone, and so we want to include you. Thank you so much for tuning in to our station again, and we'll just get started with Bill Hennessy's bio to start. So Bill is a cradle Catholic who attended Catholic schools, kindergarten through college. He grew up in South St. Louis, Missouri here at Epiphany of Our Lord Parish. He currently lives in Eureka. He also recently completed basic evangelization and intermediate evangelization apologetics certification through St. Paul Street Evangelization, a national apostolate here in the United States. Bill has also submitted all his required documents to be a St. Paul Street Evangelization team leader, but his parish pastor does not want him to do that at this time, so we'll kind of address that a little bit later as well. Bill's looking for other ways to apply his skills, experience, and training locally and abroad. He has a background in political activism, but years in the political trenches left him feeling a bit incomplete and often a little spoiled. So after his wife was finally accepted into the church, through a 14-year journey that was often painful, he was very inspired by her example of faith and perseverance to retire from leading voters to polls. Instead, he hopes to begin bringing people to Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ to people. And so having been Dominican educated at Epiphany growing up, Bill's weapon of choice throughout life has been the Holy Rosary. He carries one 24/7. He also keeps 100 rosaries on hand to give to people who need one in those moments as he is guided by the Holy Spirit. Bill, thank you so much for being with me tonight. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Michael. Thank you very much.
Great.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you again for being with us. We'll just dive right into kind of the stories of your life and kind of your ministry right now. But if you want to, first I'll just extend the invitation to you if you'd like to add anything to the bio. I'm sure there's plenty more that you could cover, but if you'd like to add anything now, feel free. Otherwise, we can just kind of dive into the questions.
I'm tired of hearing about myself, so let's just go on to the question.
Okay. All right. No problem at all. And so first off, if you could tell us a little bit about the ministry that you work on called the Rosary Coast-to-Coast. Can you tell us what that is?
Sure. This is it's something that I discovered fairly recently, but it's from coast to coast and all around the perimeter of the United States, everywhere in the interior. We hope to have rosary stations throughout, saying the rosary at about the same time, simultaneously, all four sets of mysteries in Central Time around 3 o'clock on Sunday, which is the feast day of the Our Lady of the Rosary, which was previously Our Lady of Victory. A fantastic story, but it's to ask Jesus through the Blessed Mother to have mercy on our nation, to strengthen our nation, to help revitalize our culture, so that we turn back to God and solve some of the terrible cultural, social problems that we all know about, read about, and witness every day of our lives.
Excellent. Yeah, very cool, very cool. Okay, the next question, how many local events are there for the Rosary Coast to Coast?
Right now, there are over 1,200 nationwide. In the St. Louis area, there are about a dozen the last time that I checked, and ours is just one of them. So almost anywhere you are in the St. Louis area, there will be a rosary location in your vicinity.
Okay. And which particular locations are you involved with, Bill, here in St. Louis?
I'm involved at the Shrine of the Black Madonna in Eureka Pacific area. It's near my house, and it's a beautiful, beautiful shrine. And many people haven't heard of this. As a matter of fact, I've only been there recently, even though I've lived in the Eureka area for over 10 years. It's a fantastic. There are over a dozen grottos and other sites on the property. It's open to the public. It's maintained by the Franciscan friars, and it's one of the most peaceful places that you can imagine. Whenever I have a difficult time coming up, a stressful time, I try to spend an afternoon there, just in silence and quiet in nature, walking to the grotto, saying a rosary, praying before a beautiful grotto for St. Francis of Assisi, and that's just one of many. You can experience the entire life of Christ walking through the grotto. The grottos.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. How do people find out more about this sort of event, maybe on a national level or just the local level? How can we find out more about the Rosary Coast-to-Coast?
For the local level first, the top story on my blog, which is Hennessy's View, HENNESSYSVIEW, Hennessy'sView.com, is the story of the event at the Shrine of the Black Madonna, as well as a list of the other locations around St. Louis and a link to the national map of all of the Rosary locations.
Okay, great.
So that'll be the first story on Hennessy's View, and for the national, it's just RosaryCoast-to-Coast.com.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. And then if you could just talk to us a little bit more about this event that you organized. So with this Rosary Coast-to-Coast, what can people expect to experience? I know you mentioned kind of the Shrine of the Black Madonna. Can you talk a little bit about the experience, what happens? Can you talk a little bit more about the actual location and what people can expect that would be interested in this sort of thing?
Sure. It's as I said, we want to start the Rosary around 3 o'clock. We're actually going to start a little bit later than that because of other pro-life events that are going on in St. Louis on Sunday, October 7th. If people want to participate in both, I want to give them a little bit of time to transit. But I would recommend arriving at the Black Madonna Shrine somewhere between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock. I would get there close to 2, weather permitting, to have an opportunity to walk around the grounds before the Rosary begins. So I'd say arrive between 2 and 3. At 3 o'clock, we'll gather in the open-air chapel on the property. It's right next to the parking lot, very easy to get to. It's a beautiful open-air chapel with the Black Madonna portrait under glass that's visible there. And we'll have opening remarks and opening prayers, a little statement about the purpose of the event, which, again, is for healing and return to Christ in the United States and around the world. We'll begin the Rosary at 3:30, and it will take just a little bit over an hour. So about 4:30, we should wrap up. And I know that there's a chance of rain on Sunday. The open air chapel is covered, so you'll be nice and dry in there. But it could be cool. So dress appropriately for being outdoors in October in St. Louis.
Sure. Very cool. And so you mentioned this beautiful Shrine of the Black Madonna. Is there any other dimension of that you'd like to talk about? Because I actually have not been there personally myself. Any other things that people should know that are interested in going to that particular venue about the shrine there?
Well, it has the history is fantastic, and I have links to the website of the shrine and a few comments about it. But there was originally the property was set aside for, I believe, for indigent Catholics in the St. Louis area. And in about 1927, the St. Louis Archbishop requested Franciscan brothers to come over from Poland to help care for the people in the asylum there. One of them was Brother, and I'm going to butcher his name, Brother Bronislaus Lusch, I believe is how it's pronounced. And he started building grottos on the property, and he did that in his entire life. So from 1937, I believe he began clearing the woods and built the original chapel with a portrait of the Black Madonna in the chapel. Then began building the grottos. And it ended up with over a dozen sites and grottos throughout the property. It's just absolutely beautiful, and I'm honestly embarrassed that I've cradle Catholic living in St. Louis all these years and just discovered it a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. Sure. No, thanks. Yeah. So that's kind of where we are with the venue. Then that sounds spectacular. Like I said, I need to get out there at some point. And so this Sunday, Bill is talking about this event, Sunday, October 7th, which would be, obviously it still is the Feast of Our Lady of the Holy Rosary, and it celebrates the great military victory at Lepanto, but it's also, we won't actually acknowledge it, as we know as Catholics, because the Sunday takes precedence, but it still is the feast. And this event is 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. this coming Sunday, October 7th, at the Shrine of the Black Madonna out in Eureka here in St. Louis, so that's a great event to consider as we continue to journey through our program tonight. If you're just tuning in, this is Bill Hennessy, who is our interviewee today, and he's talking about the Rosary Coast-to-Coast. I'm your host, Michael Horn. Thank you again for joining us on WCAT Radio. The next question that I have for Bill is just the choice of the particular devotion. So in a 2,000-year Catholic history, we have plenty of devotions. We have plenty of forms of prayer. We have great prayers that the saints have left us. We have the Lord's Prayer, obviously, that Jesus Christ himself gave us in the Gospels. We have so many forms of devotion, meditation, contemplation, vocal prayer, and all these different ways to express our desire for union and love and communion with God. But, Bill, why would you say that you chose the Rosary as opposed to something like Eucharistic adoration or the Mass or just praying in private? So can you talk to us a little bit about that decision to make the Rosary the center of this?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think that it starts with, and this is perhaps personal to me, but I think it affects a lot of people. So much of my life has been shaped by strong women in my life. My wife, my mother, aunts who I've had. Wonderful sisters of St. Dominic who taught me, especially in elementary school. But my whole life, it's the women in my life who've both gotten me out of trouble, forgiven me when I've gotten into trouble, and set me back on the right path over and over again. And I think because of that, the Blessed Virgin has a very special meaning for me. As far as being approachable, relatable to someone in my own life. I think I see bits of the Blessed Mother in so many of the women in my life. My grandmother, who passed away when I was very young, when I think of her asleep in her rocking chair with the rosary in her hands. We would go over to her house. She lived a few blocks from us when I was growing up. My mom would take me over to see Grandma. We'd go up to the screen door, and just inside the screen door, lit by the flickering lights of the television set, was my grandma with the rosary clutched in her hand, sound asleep. And that image has carried with me my entire life. But the beauty of the Rosary, especially for people who don't have a strong devotion to the Rosary, is it starts for me with the wedding feast at Cana, when the interaction between the Lord and his mother, when she informed him that they're out of wine, he told her, "Well, then what is that to me? My time has not yet come." And she turns to the servants, indicating our Lord, and says, "Do whatever he tells you." And that is the power of the Rosary. If you hold the Rosary up and look at it with the crucifix at the bottom, you'll see that the longer you pray the Rosary, the longer you carry on that meditation with our Blessed Mother, the closer you get to coming back to Jesus. It's like every time I pick up the Rosary and start to say it, it's a mini story of my own life of working away and working back, guided by the Blessed Mother, always back to Jesus and always back to do whatever he tells you. And at the same time, you explore the same mysteries over and over again. And to some people that sounds boring, but it's the repetition is what unlocks new ideas, new images, new understandings of the life of Christ, and how close or far we are off the path that we're supposed to follow, which is simply the life of Christ.
Mm-hmm. Amen to that. Well said, well said. And so as we look at this particular devotion to the Rosary, like you're saying, and not something else, just the power of it. And I'm glad you mentioned kind of a clarification point, that we're often accused of just kind of reciting mindless prayers, but like you said, it leads us to the heart of Christ. And I think the blessing of the Rosary, that it really takes us into the perspective of Mary again, from that command, do whatever he tells you, and to be open to how Jesus is speaking to us, again, through the lens of his mother. And who knew Jesus better during his earthly life than his mother? And what is Mary's desire for all of us? To lead us to the heart of her Son. And so it's just a beautiful way to enter into the mysteries of the life of Christ, like you're saying, and those repetitive prayers help us kind of foster that life of meditation during those Rosary mysteries. And we have those beautiful sets, now 4 sets, with John Paul II's edition of the Luminous Mysteries. And so just a great opportunity for prayer. So thanks for clarifying that for us. Have you ever done anything? I know that you mentioned, Bill, about the political activism that you've been involved with, but have you ever done anything like this before, something that we're talking about now with this Rosary Coast-to-Coast? What sort of things have you done, or if any, that it kind of parallel this sort of event for you?
Well, and I hate the problem with politics is that you can immediately turn off half the audience, right?
Right.
But I was actually one of the both local and national founders of the Tea Party movement in 2009. So I organized the event, the first event here in St. Louis, and led the local organization for while we were active for all those years. So I do have experience organizing events, building organizations, and actually affecting some change, I think. So I've done that before. But as I said, I've stepped back from that for a couple of reasons. Politics is, the closer you get to the center of politics, the uglier it becomes. And for me, it leads me to the kind of bad behavior that we see in politics in general, meaning that we say things that aren't necessarily true, and even if they are, they don't need to be said about our opponents, simply to get an upper hand. And it's very difficult for people who feel strongly about issues and events to avoid that without first grounding themselves very deeply in their faith. And when I began the journey of trying to get more in touch with my faith to help guide my political life, I realized that the answers that I was seeking in politics, the changes I wanted to see in the world through politics, were actually only going to come about with for lack of a better term, a mass conversion to a strong Christian faith that people not just think about and not just believe, but actually begin living in every day of their lives. So if I want to achieve the political outcomes that I've always wanted, it seems that the best way to do that is by following Christ and leading people to Christ and to that path. The path has already been laid for us. All we have to do is walk it.
Sure. Awesome. And what do you hope to achieve exactly with this Rosary Coast-to-Coast event, Bill? You touched on kind of the significance and what it means to you and how you kind of want to contrast it with the political activism that was often a part of your past. And so just looking at this Rosary Coast-to-Coast event, what do you concretely hope to achieve from it?
Well, it's a very small wish, but I hope that at least one person who either has never prayed the Rosary or has not prayed the Rosary in a long time comes out to join us and gets re-engaged with that particular form of prayer. And I hope it's more than one. My goals for this are not nearly as grandiose as they were in politics with very concrete things, but I really want to reintroduce, especially Catholics who have become lukewarm or drifted away from the faith, as I have several times in my life. I know how it happens, and I have experience coming back into line, getting back on the path. I would like to meet those people and help them back on the path. I'm not looking for big events with tens of thousands of people in Keener Plaza like we did in the Tea Party days. I would much prefer to meet one or two people at a time and help them to reignite the fire for Christ and His church.
Beautiful, beautiful. So if people are considering attending, as obviously one of your hopes is that a new person, new people, droves of people might encounter the Rosary, might encounter Jesus Christ in a different way, what should people bring to this event out at the Black Madonna Shrine in Eureka?
If they have a Rosary, bring it. If not, I will have plenty to hand out. If they don't know how to pray the Rosary, they won't need anything this day because we will lead the prayers throughout. But I will also have how to pray the Rosary pamphlets that are very easy to get started. It's very easy. The nice thing about saying the Rosary is that very quickly you memorize everything, the order, the prayers, the mysteries that we meditate on for each decade of the Rosary. And it becomes a very portable form of deep meditative prayer, which is just wonderful. So earlier you asked about other kinds of devotions, which I think are all wonderful, especially spending time before the Blessed Sacrament. The great thing about the Rosary is it's so portable. You can say the Rosary everywhere. I say on my drive to work every day is about 20 minutes, and I have a Rosary audio, an online site that I use that plays the appropriate mysteries every day. I fire that off when I get in the car, and I say the Rosary. I sometimes have to sit in the parking lot for a few minutes for the end, but I get to say the Rosary every day just on my drive to work. It's that convenient of a prayer, and for me anyway, the meditative quality of it, it resets, recalibrates my entire day in just 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Very cool. And so if people have a Rosary, they can bring them, but if they they don't, you have some available and can kind of guide through them. You mentioned the importance of the Rosary in your own life and how it recharges us. Beautiful, beautiful reflection. Just a couple practical questions, too, about the event this coming Sunday, again, October 7th, from 3 to 4:30 p.m. Is it true, Bill, that there is an optional kind of sightseeing sort of tour before around 2, or is that right? Is right or wrong?
Yeah, it's a self-guided tour. The inside the open-air chapel, there are self-tour guides that you can grab and follow. If the weather's nice, I would strongly recommend coming early to spend some time visiting the sites. Dress appropriately. Don't dress like you're going to Easter Sunday Mass. Dress like you're going to be outside and you know how St. Louis weather is in October. It could be 90 and 35 on the same day. So check the weather, dress appropriately. The Rosary itself will be in an open air chapel that's covered, but wear shoes like you're going to be walking trails. There is pavement around the grottos, but you're outdoors in an outdoor environment, so dress appropriately.
Great. And if it does rain during the event, what happens?
We are going to plow right ahead. So if it rains, it's a short walk from the parking lot into the chapel, and the chapel's covered. So it really won't be that different. I suppose if it's a hard driving rain, you could get a little damp on the inside. But we're saying the Rosary. I'm sure the folks who fought the Battle of Lepanto faced a much rougher time. So I think we can stomach through for mysteries of the Rosary for an hour. At least I can.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. And just a reminder to our listeners, again, we're reaching almost the midway point of the show today, and I just want to let you all know that we have a couple good resources to help you find out more information about this event. Again, coming up this coming Sunday, October 7th, from 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. essentially, but there's also an optional self-guided tour where you can see the grottos and the memorials of the shrine there of the Black Madonna in Eureka around 2 p.m. So you should bring a rosary if you're interested in attending again. And this prayer takes place in the open-air chapel to begin with. And also just want to let you know that you can view a couple different websites to find more information on the Rosary Coast-to-Coast and also Bill Hennessy's particular website. And so Bill's website is hennessysview.com, and so that's HENNESSYSVIEU.com, and then rosarycoast-to-coast.com as well. You can find plenty of information about this endeavor, about this ministry on those two sites. And so, like I said, we're about at the half point of our program, and so we'll certainly return to the practical promotion of this event as we head in closer to this coming weekend with this great event. But just want to ask you, Bill, a couple questions that came up kind of as I was introducing you to our listeners today, especially with the bio segment that you've offered to us. And you mentioned the critical role that your wife's journey to the church played in your life and kind of inspired you and galvanized you to enter into kind of a life of deeper faith and perseverance and to bring people to Christ in different ways, and especially with this particular apostolate, with the Rosary Coast-to-Coast and this prayer of the Most Holy Rosary for the conversion of sinners, for the conversion of ourselves, for the conversion of our country. And so can you talk to us a little bit more about the role that the conversion of your wife played in your faith journey thus far through life?
Sure, I'd love to. It's we were my wife and I. We're both previously married. We were married in 2003 on October 3rd, 2003, as a matter of fact. And
happy anniversary.
Thank you. And at the time, I was not married in the church, but I was a Catholic, so I did not have a valid marriage. At some point in the first couple of years of our marriage, my wife decided, she had never been baptized. She started looking into the church. So I requested and received, or petitioned for and received an annulment for my marriage. She applied for an annulment for hers, and unfortunately that was a little bit more difficult because she had never been baptized. Those who don't know how this works, I've become a little bit more of an expert than I wish, but the church will recognize a non-Catholic marriage as valid based on the intent and the condition of the couple at the time that the marriage took place. So just because two non-Catholics marry outside of the Catholic Church doesn't mean they don't have a valid marriage. So we worked with the church. She went to RCIA, I think in 2005 originally. We filled out the paperwork. It came back, and her petition was rejected. And I think she ended up with 3 or 4 different petitions over 14 years before it was finally approved this year. And she went through RCIA a second time. So she never gave up. Her resilience was remarkable, and it was just inspirational. And to tell you how inspirational it was, during the course of her journey, during the course of her 14-year journey of frustration and trials and setbacks and getting her hopes up and coming back, striving for that glorious day of when she would march into the church on Easter Vigil Mass, to be received, to be baptized, to receive confirmation, to receive her first Holy Communion, all of the preparation for RCIA that she had now been witnessing for years. During the course of that time, while she was waiting on her journey, she watched her mother enter the church and go through that process, her daughter, her son, and her son-in-law. So in that time, my wonderful stepdaughter has grown up, become a woman, been married, and become Catholic, while my wife waited and waited and waited and waited. Mm-hmm. And then this June 2nd, finally, she was received into the church. We had our marriage validated, confirmed in the church, her first communion. So June of this year was like a great breaking forth for our family. But when I spoke earlier about the witness of the women in my life, that's probably the shining example of perseverance and faith.
Very beautiful. Excellent. Yeah, and so that's a super powerful story, and just kind of shows again both your perseverance and your wife's perseverance as well. You mentioned also, just briefly, kind of with the work of political activism, you mentioned kind of how it can be hard to turn the tide in different ways, because sometimes you lose audience members. Can you talk a little bit about kind of some insights or lessons that you've learned just through being a political activist? Anything that you think are just really valuable takeaways that we could learn from in our own lives, especially our lives as disciples of the Lord Jesus Christ, and just kind of where we are today as a church in terms of kind of our own evangelical efforts and kind of reaching out to those in need. And I obviously would be remiss if I didn't mention, at least passingly, just the problems of the sexual abuse scandals that have surfaced again recently in our church, and just how does your career in political activism kind of relate to our call today to live the gospel and to be missionaries, to be evangelists, and to be those who kind of keep a really truthful and hopeful perspective on our lives?
Sure. Well, first of all, with the problems, especially in the hierarchy of the church that we've seen, which I know both it angers us and it breaks our hearts and it embarrasses us. We all of us, especially in politics, we all have experienced getting behind someone or a party who was going to fix everything that we were very proud to stand behind, and then been disappointed and let down, and felt that frustration. And the reality is, and I wrote a blog post about this too, that it's the danger of putting our faith in human beings. And it's not to say that we shouldn't trust other people, but we have to put our hopes in one thing, of one day hearing the Lord say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That is the only mission, and that's the only thing that we can put we can stock our hopes into. And when a bishop fails, when a cardinal fails, even when the Pope fails, when our parish priest lets us down, understand that they're trying to get through life the best they can, just like we are. And they're also burdened, and I've seen this in politics too, the problem of winning. So when a politician wins, it's very difficult for them to remember what got them there and why they ran in the first place. It just is. They're surrounded by people who have a completely a different agenda for their lives than they had as a candidate or as a citizen thinking about getting into politics. And if you think about it, if you're a bishop or a cardinal or an archbishop, you've won in the hierarchy of the church and the advancement of the ecclesial order. So you have a territory and an office to defend, and sometimes people lose sight of what the real mission is, and defending their position, their power, their office. It kind of gets in the way of the very simple mission of getting as many people to Christ as they can. And they shouldn't, obviously. We hope, I would hope that when a priest is ordained bishop or elevated to cardinal or archbishop, that it's done with the idea in mind that this individual, this man, is the best we have to bring more people into the fold, to keep people on the path, and to bring more people to Christ. But we also have an organization to run, and again, that there's sometimes competing, sometimes conflicting qualities in the way we advance leaders. But be patient and trust that we've read the book of Revelation. We know how the story ends, and the good guys win. So however frustrating and embarrassing and difficult it seems now, your primary mission is to keep yourself on the path, and pray for the church, and trust that the good Lord will, according to his plan, bring the church back into line with his mission.
Amen to that. Yeah. Thank you for that reflection. Yeah. And so, Bill, you mentioned kind of this beauty of kind of where we are as a church, and understanding again that the cross is what wins. It's the blood of Jesus Christ that saves us, and that we must be kind of very vigilant in many ways about our own salvation. Again, and like you said, I think you clarified very well. It's not about a selfish thing, but you got to take care of business in your own house so that you can lead others faithfully and with conviction and boldness to the kingdom of heaven with you. And so you got to take care of things at home. You got to make sure you're fostering your interior life. You're going to Mass. You're receiving the sacraments. You're in a state of grace in you're constantly surrounding yourself with the things of God. And so that's beautiful for us as we continue to walk the road of Christian discipleship. So thank you for that. Another question I have for you is just generally kind of how do you spend your time these days when you're not kind of working with the Rosary Coast-to-Coast and such, especially the event coming up this Sunday, October 7th. But how do you spend your time?
Well, it's very busy, so I do a lot of reading. I've always been an avid reader, so I spend a lot of time reading. I try to keep myself wrapped up in some novena or devotion. When one ends, I start another one, and part of that is just, number one, to broaden my understanding of the faith, but it's also to keep from getting into trouble. I guess is the best way to put it. With idle hands are the devil's workshop, as my mother used to say, and it's true. If you keep yourself occupied with prayer or reading about the lives of saints, when I was a kid, I thought, why would anyone read the lives of saints? Could there be anything more boring? And that's a terrible thought. Is that when you start reading the story of Saint Dominic and what he did, and I won't spoil it for anyone. If you don't know the story of Saint Dominic, you have to read it. It's absolutely remarkable. He's an inspirational, heroic figure. And Saint Francis de Sales is another saint to look up that maybe we don't hear as much about, but the lives of the saints is fabulous, and it keeps me out of trouble. So that's primarily what I work at is staying out of trouble. I'm also a member of the Knights of Columbus, so I do work there, and that's about it. I blog on Hennessy's View a couple of times a week. I'm working on that has a lot of political stuff on it, so don't read it. Just read the story on the Rosary Coast-to-Coast. Leave the other stuff alone. But I'm working on splitting that off into a new blog that is just about the faith and the journey. So when that's set up, watch Hennessy's View for that announcement, and I hope to have that launched toward the end of this year.
Sure, excellent. Okay, and also just kind of not to bring up a topic that might not be the best thing you want to talk about. I just wanted to mention it, and if we don't want to talk about it, that's totally fine. But the idea of St. Paul Street evangelization, which has been something that I've really enjoyed doing, and in your bio it just mentions kind of how you have been certified through that, and you have gone through the training, and that's, like I said, a wonderful, wonderful opportunity that our church has provided for us to form teams locally and to form chapters to go out in our cities, in our dioceses and archdioceses, to bring the gospel to people on the streets and to give them rosaries, to give them miraculous medals, to give them pamphlets, literature, and cover various teachings of the Catholic Church, especially correcting misconceptions that many people have about our Catholic faith, especially things like the communion of saints, the intercession of the Mother of God and the role that she plays in our Christian lives, things like sacramental confession, the real presence of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist, whatever it might be. Could you talk to us a little bit about your quote-unquote experience of St. Paul Street evangelization, or not so much, or just general reflections on that apostolate that has been forming over the last several years?
Oh, sure, yeah. And I guess I first heard about it on EWTN some time ago, and started looking at the site, and it was like, and the first thing that popped into my head was, wow, this is the Tea Party for Catholics. It's so it obviously had an instant appeal to me, except that they had done such a fantastic job of organizing the training, the basic evangelist training is just absolutely wonderful, not just for evangelism, but for if you're in sales, if you're doing anything with people, It's just beautiful, well-organized training. The materials that they offer, I don't think that they make a profit on it. They basically can buy the materials for their costs, are just fantastic. Their pamphlets are first rate. Very good place to go get. If you, like me, I went through many years of Catholic school, but I went through in an era when the catechism wasn't so strong. It was before Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II, revised the catechism and republished it. And honestly, I've learned almost everything I know about the faith as an adult. I'll just be honest with you, especially when it comes to apologetics. We just didn't have that very strong of a training. It was probably what we received was it was very shallow and very light and very surface compared to what's available today. So I think a lot of adults, and I'm my mid-50s, I think a lot of adults my age who even went to Catholic school owe themselves to take a look to make sure that their formation was as strong as maybe they think it was. Just because you went to schools in that era, Catholic schools in that era, I don't think that's a guarantee that you were as well formed as we should be. So, St. Paul's Street Evangelization is a fantastic place to go to reform yourself if you need it.
Yeah, and I would echo that 100% in my experience as well. And I think you mentioned a great point, and not to bash the Catholic education system that we have by any means. There are very many good Catholic schools, but there are quite a few friends that I have and many parents that I know that have chosen to homeschool their kids to offer that sort of formation and that environment of education. So that's another option. And I think there's also just a lot of great materials that our church produces. And so I think, like we were mentioning, the sexual abuse scandals that have arisen once again in our church, and how terrible it can be, but it also always gives us an opportunity too, because it helps us to kind of call ourselves back to vigilance, and then to, again, re-catechize, to reform ourselves, and to realize just kind of what is the Catholic Church? What does the Catholic Church teach? What is it all about? And so I think there's so many great apostolates nowadays, especially things like Catholic Answers or the Word on Fire Institute that Bishop Robert Barron's forming now. And there's just so many things out there. St. Paul Street Evangelization. There's so many Respect Life apostolates out there. There's so many ministries that present the truth about hard issues. The Theology of the Body Institute. There's so many things out there that convey the truth to a very confused and broken world in many ways. And I think the challenge to my generation especially is just to kind of look at things again and to re-catechize, like I said, because there's so many misconceptions about things. And I think if we truly research the issues that we might have doctrinally with the Catholic Church, that we'll find plenty of resources that can articulate things clearly, that can explain and correct us where we might be in error, and show the beauty of the tradition of the Church and the magisterial authority that the Catholic Church has given to the rock of Peter when Jesus Christ affirms him in his faith in Matthew 16:18. And so just to know that our church has protection with the truth, and to teach the truth guided by the Holy Spirit, and to help us kind of live free lives of joy in the truth. And so Jesus Christ tells us that the truth will set us free. And so I think, like you said, Bill, so many things out there to help us form ourselves if we just take advantage of them. Okay. And as we kind of head into the last couple minutes of our segment, again, this is called I Thought You'd Like to Know This Too. I am with Bill Hennessy, who's a native St. Louisan just like myself. I'm Michael Horn. I'm hosting. I originally got involved with WCAT Radio through my graduate work at Holy Apostles College and Seminary. I graduated in May of 2018, and so it's great to be with all of you, and I thank Bill again for being with us. Bill, do you have any kind of thoughts or things you'd like to expound upon about the interview that we've gone through so far? Anything else you want to share with our listeners about yourself or about the Rosary Coast-to-Coast, or anything more about the event coming up this Sunday, October 7th?
Well, first, I want to thank you very much for having me on, for being so generous with the time. I appreciate it very much. It's humbling, and I can't say enough about the work that you're doing to bring people into the faith and to strengthen the faith that people have. If no matter how far you think you might be off of the path, getting back on the path is a lot easier than you could ever imagine. So to any listeners who don't think that they're, for one reason or another, that coming out on Sunday to saying the Rosary with a bunch of other with strangers, if you think that that's too much for you, don't worry about it. You're really only saying the Rosary to Christ, and we're all there to support you. So
Right.
Come on out. If you've been away for a while, this is a good opportunity to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And Bill, is there a kind of group of collaborators that you have with this sort of ministry? Or is it kind of a solo act that you spearhead yourself?
Yeah, it's pretty much a solo act. Me and family, and
Sure.
friend of mine has offered to come out and help. And the folks at the Black Madonna Shrine have been extremely helpful. But for the most part, it's just me.
Okay. Well, good for you. Good for you. Do you have any questions for me as we go forward? I think we'll kind of just start wrapping up. If you don't have anything else for me.
No, just thank you very much. I appreciate it. I've enjoyed it.
Awesome. My pleasure. Thank you too, Bill. Yeah, it was a great opportunity for me to kind of quote unquote meet you through the phone and everything, and to kind of catch up on your work with this. And I'm glad that we could have you as a guest on I Thought You'd Like to Know This Too. And so as we sign off today, I hope you all are doing well. All of our listeners, we ask the blessings of God upon you, and we continue to keep you in our prayers as we do all of the listeners to WCAT Radio. It's been a pleasure to be with Bill Hennessy today and his endeavor with the Rosary Coast-to-Coast. I just want to remind all of our listeners that the plan for this coming Sunday, October 7th, here in St. Louis, Missouri, there's a 2 to 3 p.m. optional tour of the grottos and memorials at the Shrine of the Black Madonna in Eureka, in Missouri. And following that, from 3 to 3:30 p.m., there will be opening remarks and prayers in the open-air chapel there, and then from 3:30 to 4:30, there will be a recitation of the Holy Rosary with all 4 sets of mysteries prayed. And we're praying for good weather. It's been crazy nice here in St. Louis, and as we all know, the weather in St. Louis is very, very unpredictable, and so just be prepared for rain if it does happen, and also be prepared for 95 degrees. Who knows what it could be like here in St. Louis. So that's kind of the plan of action for this Sunday, October 7th. And as I mentioned earlier, it is the feast of Our Lady of the Holy Rosary, and that's why this is such a beautiful event for all those in the area that can pray the Holy Rosary. And feel free to invite your friends to this event. And also, I want to give a last shout out to the resources that Bill has provided for us. And so if you'd like to learn more about the Rosary Coast-to-Coast, please visit rosarycoast-to-coast.com. And if you'd like to look at Bill's particular page, his website is hennessysview.com. Again, that's HENNESSYSVIEW.com. hennessysview.com. And so you can go to those 2 sites for more information. We want to thank you once more for tuning in to I Thought You'd Like to Know This Too. May God continue to bless you. Thank you so much again, Bill, and you have a blessed day.
Thank you. You too, Michael.
All right, thanks.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.